Well, welcome to our post-election briefing. I've gathered together 3 speakers today to talk to you about the expectations from Labour, where we see the legislation changing in terms of tax, audit and accounting, and of course HR. And we'll talk in terms of based on the manifesto projections, but obviously we would be looking to a budget in September or early October at the latest, and also bearing in mind Labour's projection that the HR changes are likely to come into force within 100 days. So that's a very tough target that the new Labour leaders have set themselves, but we'll be discussing the implications for yourselves as accountants in business and in practice, and try and help you sort of manoeuvre through this difficult time in changing politics, and also exciting time in terms of where we go in the next 2 months to 6 months. And obviously in terms of Croner-i, we'll be leading you through the way and providing as much guidance and support as we can. So I'm going to start with Paul Robbins, our head of tax, and Paul's going to outline to you some of the expectations we have about tax changes coming up in the next few months, and where we expect Labour could take action, even though there was limited tax information in the manifesto. So Paul, over to you.
Thanks, Sara. So yeah, no, as you said, there is limited information, and we'll try and make the best of it as we can. I think in the manifesto there are lots of whats, but not very many hows. So I think that's something for us to grapple with over the next few weeks and months. I thought I'd start with some introductions really for people that I think most people have picked up by now that the new Chancellor is Rachel Reeves, but there is also obviously a new Chief Secretary to the Treasury, who's Darren Jones. So he sits in the cabinet, so he's sort of the number 2 at the Treasury, and indeed a new Financial Secretary to the Treasury, who goes under the name of Spencer Livermore Lord, or Baron Livermore indeed. And he has really sort of direct responsibility for the UK tax system, so we'll no doubt be hearing from him pretty regularly. As you said, there's a budget coming up in the autumn. That's going to be announced, the exact timing will be announced before the summer recess, which we still don't know when that exactly will be, but presumably towards the end of July. And I think it is important to note that one of the points that the Labour manifesto made was that they would now go back to having a single fiscal event every year. So presumably on that basis we won't then get another budget until the autumn of next year, unless they decide to change the occurrence to spring. Okay, so looking at some of the measures that that were in the manifesto, I guess probably the highest profile one was the whole VAT on school fees, which is clearly going to go ahead. There's no doubt about that one. There's some uncertainty around timing, because it has to obviously make its way through Parliament, and do you really want to bring it in halfway through a academic year? So I guess the best bet is it may not actually come into effect properly until September 2025, and there's a lot of uncertainty around the precise scope and how exactly it's going to work. Indeed, it's by no means certain that it will be a 20% VAT rate. The assumption has always been that it will, but no one's actually said that, so we'll have to wait and see.
So you're imagining we could be looking at a reduced rate of 5% perhaps?
I'm just saying that no one said otherwise, so it's always possible. So yeah, just have to wait and see, like so many of these things. As regards sort of the tax impact on individuals, I thought there was a couple of things worth highlighting. Labour clearly have no plans to remove the freeze on income tax bands, so fiscal drag, while salaries continue to go up, will still play a big part in everybody's tax lives. But they have ruled out rate rises in income tax, national insurance and VAT, noticeably not CGT. So I think there's a lot of talk around aligning CGT and IT rates, obviously by raising the former. There's also been a bit of talk around principal private residence relief, which is clearly a tax relief that affects a large number of us. Now, whether the government will really be brave enough to tackle that one has one's doubts. Inheritance tax, again, really very little specific mention of that in the manifesto, but again, a bit of speculation around on the assumption of Labour having it in its sights to some extent, looking at maybe increasing the potential exempt transfer period from 7 years to 10 years, maybe removing or reducing the availability of CGT rebasing on death, and considering the IHT position of pensions, which all of those are the things that people are wondering about whether Labour will have in their sights. On pensions, the Labour have said they won't reintroduce the pensions lifetime allowance. What they have said is they will increase by 1% the SDLT, stamp duty land tax, paid by non-residents. That's definitely in there.
Paul, just a quick point on the pensions. Obviously, there's been talk about perhaps looking at the tax relief on pensions for higher rate earners. Have you been hearing much about that?
Nothing beyond, nothing beyond the sort of general level of speculation that's going on at the moment. Certainly, I certainly wouldn't rule it out.
I was thinking you might have word on the street.
Unfortunately, not on this one, I'm afraid. Non-DOMs, which the Conservative Party sort of made a last gasp effort to tackle. Again, the assumption is that Labour Party will carry on and probably toughen up to some extent some of the Conservative plans to move away from a remittance basis and onto a residence-based regime. They're going to tackle tax assets. They're going to tax assets in offshore trusts, and they are, again, because they've talked about it forever, tackle the specific issue of carried interest for private equity businesses, bosses. The thing that keeps being mentioned, and I dare I mention, is a wealth tax. Again, who knows? There's no specific mention of that in the manifesto, but it must be tempting, I guess, for a Labour government. So that's really the main things I could come up with in terms of individuals. In terms of businesses, I mean, there's not a lot at all really here. They've said that they will keep the 25% corporation tax rate at that level for 5 years. They've said they're fully behind full expensing and annual investment allowance to encourage investment, and they've said that they will clarify the rules as to what qualifies and what doesn't for those two reliefs. But really, that's it, apart from saying that they're going to do a roadmap for corporation tax throughout the rest of this Parliament, so that, as they see it, businesses and companies particularly have a clear indication of what's coming up. They are definitely going to tackle business rates,
yes,
and they will hike up the rates of tax paid by the level of windfall tax paid by oil and gas companies as well. That's really the main things, but I also wanted, just finally before I finish, to share what I thought was some really good points, which aren't tax related, and they certainly weren't in the not directly tax related, but the CIOT wrote to all of the parties in the run-up to the election saying, please, can you do these things, whichever of you gets into power. And I thought they were really good, so I'm more or less just going to read them out. But they obviously want the government to look at resourcing HMRC so that they provide a better level of service. They want to review the whole tax digitalisation process so that it works, really focuses on the needs of taxpayers. They want to commit to a meaningful, and these words are really carefully chosen, meaningful simplification of the tax system. They want to get R&D regime working properly, on the assumption being that certain legitimate claims aren't getting through at the moment. They want to have effective but proportionate action to tackle rogue agents, which again was something that has been talked about for a long while. Create a greater transparency and accountability around policy costings which I think is great because these things tend to get announced and then disappear off into the ether and to be dropped 3 years later without much discussion. And then finally, adherence to a sort of sound process for making tax policy, so consultation and all the rest of it. So I thought those are some really good things to have in mind.
No, excellent. And obviously on the HMRC, that is a major issue for our audience today, for any accountants trying to deal with HMRC. So it'll be really interesting to watch how they take this forward, as they've said that they want to cut down on tax avoidance by £6 billion pounds, which is obviously rather a challenge. So with the current resources, so it'll be great to watch. Thank you.
Yeah, I think Bower Livermore's going to be busy. Certainly.
Indeed.
Gosh, all of us are going to be busy, aren't we?
Yeah, I think so. That's good.
Yeah. And so, Julia, it'd be great to hear what your expectations are on the audit and accounting front.
Well, absolutely, and also much broader than that for us. We have the legal side, the regulatory, looking into practice management as well, and how firms are going to be impacted by everything. Just picking up as well on what Paul said about oil and gas companies, clearly in the manifesto there's a massive green remit. They're looking to bring in the Energy Independence Act, whatever the details of that will be, lots more on nature restoration, renewable energy pushing. And for us, so we've just launched Navigate Sustainability, like looking at the reporting side, and we can fully expect that they will quite want to adopt the international standards, the ISSB 1 and 2, as they are now, into the UK kind of as soon as possible, to help with the whole transparency, the reporting of the sort of the green agenda. They have said there'll be more of a shift to looking at consumption emissions rather than the UK's production emissions, so looking at actually what do we use as consumers rather than where things are being produced and how we're operating on that side. So there'll be a clear knock-on impact on data extraction, reporting, assurance, and everything that follows on from there. So as you said, we'll be watching that space really closely and seeing what's happening. And under obviously Ed Miliband as the new Secretary of State for Energy Security Net Zero, see what he does. Then also looking at more on the sort of business side and the audit side. So clearly we have Jonathan Reynolds doing the Secretary of State for Business and Trade and President of the Board of Trade. For a long time now, we've had all these discussions about audit reform. Do we change the FRC into ARGA, the new regulator? And they have said, Labour have said that they would strongly support that move. As I say, it's been in the pipeline for over 10 years. They do need the UK to be seen as a trusted place to do business and carry on that whole sort of great place to invest idea. However, we don't think that ARGA will happen still until at least 2026. We'll just have to watch this space. But clearly, like quality of audit and assurance, also professional qualifications and maintaining your CPD, aspects like that will be a clear focus for professional bodies as well. I expect so as well. CIT, I know the ICAW have been pushing for more powers, more strength as well. So yeah, it will definitely be a continued focus for the audit market. And then also we keep a close eye on the ECTA provisions coming in, so the Economic Crime Corporate Transparency Act. And obviously some parts of the law have come out already. There's draft regulations on a number of areas, looking at continuing the plan to appoint a sort of independent economic crime commissioner, looking at ID checks and the sort of rigour and tackling sort of economic crime. And similar, I think, to HMRC, we are expecting that Companies House will have a bit of a boost and have more staff already. They're putting up the fees. They're going to need to do more to service the law in respect of looking at the company limits, moving to software filing, increasing their powers to push back on filings and are things correct. So yeah, we definitely expect more of that to kind of carry on, and secondary legislation.
And then the previous government was planning to make some quite significant changes to filing for smaller businesses.
Yes.
And do you expect to see that carried forward with the new government?
Very much so. I think, again, you're trying to make life easier for small and medium businesses, and there's some other sort of economic changes that they've already announced that will come in. But yeah, I think anything that, again, eases the administrative burden, and it also then helps on the other side, companies have to be able to check, if people qualify for the right limits. That I think will come in as well, definitely. Alongside that, there's also the sort of changes to filing, so bringing in the profit and loss account for small and micro. So definitely expect that all to come in. And then and sort of alongside that, I think they have mentioned there's going to be a 250 billion UK national investment bank and a network of the regional and national development banks as well. So just to really give those small businesses and innovators that sort of additional funding options. It's talking about using the post office network. So you've heard about that. So again, we'll just have to see what comes in really, and hope that SMEs are going to be promoted as well.
Interesting. Yes. Yesterday the Chancellor launched the National Wealth Fund.
Yes.
So this was already they've started fast. They're not sitting around. So that was a sort of really quite a major announcement, and had a lot of interest from that, from our readership. So they've set aside nearly £8 billion for investment in green industries, startup industries, new areas. So that'll be interesting. So I think that there's definitely sort of trying to act as a catalyst for change and investment.
Definitely. And then, and finally, as I say, on the practice management side, this probably leads quite well on to Amanda, is all the HR changes and everything else that we mentioned in the 100 days. That's clearly going to impact, your accountants, auditors, finance teams, enforcement of workers' rights and everything. So it's just be sure that, we're watching this space on all of that as well. And we'll bring... we have links from our sort of Navigate Practice Management area through to the HR content that's available to people as well. So that will all come through from there, and we'll keep people updated.
Excellent. So Amanda, over to you for the HR aspect of the new government and what their priorities are going to be, because they have quite an ambitious list of at least 25 measures that I picked up on initially. So really, what are you focusing on?
I think it's picking out as well which ones to speak about, but I think they've had plenty of time knowing they were going to come in to prepare for all this and get it ready. So we have this 100 days, we're talking about the 25th of October. And we've just had all those changes, haven't we, come in April, changes coming in October, which are going to change again. So I think, like when you said, there's a real link with the financial directors and the accountants and their clients. They're going to have really deep pockets for some of the things that they are talking about for the employer. The employer, I think, is really shocked by all the changes that have come in. That's the feedback I'm getting at the moment. But I've got some here now. The ones that jump out at the moment are... You've put changes in from April and you think they're okay and you think they'll get through things like carers leave, for example. Well, they're thinking of making that paid. So pockets again, and that's on the back of when I talk about HR, I always think about society. Whatever happens globally or in society has a huge impact on HR. What I mean by that, when there's a shortage of beds in hospitals for the elderly, or the elderly are actually stuck in hospitals, there's no carers packages, domiciliary care was affected, and care industry was affected when the pandemic hit. We're short on staff. Labour are focusing on that and pay for those people, bringing the care people back to that sector. They're also looking at paid carers leave, because they know that you're going to have to rely on family members to care for the elderly and people that need care in any way, or vulnerable people. So they're looking at the paid carers leave. So we've always had carers leave come in now since April. We're now going to have the paid carers leave if everything goes to plan. So there's extra money. And what I would say to people that are listening, any leave that comes in, you need to manage it. You need to manage it because it can be exploited. The other thing that is quite interesting, lower earnings limit, they want to abolish that for SSP. So
that's statutory sick pay changes, which will affect literally every
person. Again, affecting money, etc. Then we've got national minimum wage and having one banding. I don't know what age that's going to start at, but we've seen those bandings change anyway in HR. So again, that's going to affect a lot of businesses out there financially that will have to look at that. We've got changes to contracts. So
just on national minimum wage, that generally goes up in April of
Yes, it does,
year.
April, yeah.
So again, there'll be quite a quick decision possibly on these changes.
Exactly, and the employers already have said they're just getting over the last two big hikes in wage, the national minimum wage going up. So that's another thing. And then we've got the naming and shaming list. If you don't, a lot of people don't go to webinars or seminars that we have on the platform, and they don't realise the wages have gone up. Actually, I meet them when you go out to seminars. So there's the national minimum wage. Then the other things that are going to affect them are changing contracts, changing policies, changing procedures. So we've got a statutory bereavement leave. Now, interestingly, legislation in Scotland and also for the transport industry, they have bereavement leave in. A lot of employers have bereavement leave in. In Scotland, it's the legislation. In the transport industry, it is. But they're bringing it in for England and Wales, and they're making it within the UK that it's legislation. And so you may have a policy in place for bereavement leave, but you will have to change it to update. So and align with what the new changes will be.
And that would give an entitlement of a certain number of paid days.
Yeah, I'm assuming it's going to be paid days, but at the moment it's at the discretion of the owner of the business. The other thing is, when we look at bereavement leave, there's lots of different family setups now. So I might ring in and say, my mum was married to a man whose son is my half brother, but not really by blood, and they've just passed away. Can I have time? Where does it stop? There has to, I don't know the ins and outs of that yet. We have a lot of different family setups. The right to disconnect. So we've heard about this all over Europe, but you know what? We've got a huge problem with mental health. So right to disconnect policies. I think I can safely say that we may have all, lived in an environment, worked in an environment where we didn't have mobile phones years ago, or we used to use teletext we didn't have, in fact, faxes came in afterwards, and we didn't have email, did we? Yeah. And we could disconnect from work, but now you can't. People are doing emails, they're getting emails on a Friday night, it's interfering with family time, it's affecting the mental health. So there's a real focus again on right to disconnect and mental health here. So you may have a right to disconnect policy in place, but when this comes in, you'll have to revamp it again just to check that it is in line with the legislation. Disciplinary capability. So this is a big thing, because what they're trying to do, last time they were in, with unfair dismissal, there's 85 rights to take somebody, over 85 rights of taking somebody to tribunal. I think I've got that number right, but at the moment it's 2 years to take somebody to tribunal, an employer, if you're disgruntled. So they want to change it. Last time it was 2 years, it was 1 year. They want to make it a day one right for unfair dismissal. Yes. So that's going to be so costly to the employer. We're overwhelmed in the tribunal service. So it's unbelievable. Obviously, this has to be negotiated, and they're going to speak to experts about it. But straight away, unfair dismissal rights. I think, for me personally, I think that's going to be really hard work on business owners' HR. And the other side of that is that they want to, instead of it being, when I leave your company, I have 3 months in which to take you to tribunal. In exceptional circumstances, there are extensions to that, but in different types of law and areas, but 6 months they want to make it. So that means employers can't rest for 6 months because somebody might take them to tribunal. So again, that's something to think about. So that brings into question your suitability clauses, your short service dismissals, and your probationary periods. They have to be watertight to protect you from this. Carers leave, I spoke about making it flexible working. Whoa, we knew that was coming in April, didn't we? Day one right to request. They want to make it that, I don't know what's going to happen with this. They want to make it sort of almost like a right
default,
to it. Yeah, a default,
a default right.
And I don't know what's going to happen to the 8 prescribed reasons. So, it's all a bit sketchy with that. I don't know how that's going to work. Harassment's a really interesting one, and I really do agree with this. I shouldn't go to work and be harassed. You shouldn't go to work and have, harassment. You shouldn't have, banter that's offensive or anything. It's full stop. They're saying it should be full stop. Now, if you remember, the Conservatives said about harassment, they said in October, do as much as reasonably practical, basically, but it's all about training, it's about the harassment policy. They're saying full stop, it shouldn't happen in the workplace. We have a very diverse country, it shouldn't happen in the workplace. So, that will have to be changed in October, and then again, so in the future when this comes in. And the other side of this, which is quite interesting, is third-party harassment is coming back in. So I agree with this, third-party harassment. When you work in a doctor's surgery, people are shouting at you because they can't get an appointment, you're working behind a bar maybe, you're working in retail, you're working in care, you've been abused. It shouldn't happen. You shouldn't go to work every day and have that. And you'll see signs up, people saying it, sure. But the employer has got to stop that and be preventative. So again, that's something to think about. Sickness redundancy, I'm thinking whistleblowing tips. I'm just going to read off some of the policies that are affected. Pay is the main one, isn't it? The national minimum wage. And then bringing it into accountants, is the type of contracts you issue. So they're looking at those exploitative 0-hour contracts, and also looking at that and the term worker and employee, and also self-employment. I always get asked about self-employment, and you know from accountants that you deal with and their clients, a lot of them don't have contracts in place, their clients don't. A lot of them say they're self-employed, and they're not. They're clamping down on this, and also they're putting a contract in, or looking at a contract for self-employed, and having worked for one of the biggest publicly funded sort of organisations in the UK. I've waited 6 months to be paid for a job I've done, and they're stopping that. They want to stop that, where if you're self-employed, you don't have to wait that long to get a wage. You know, you should some sort of contract, which, you know, I tend to agree with there as well. But again, all this has come in out of the employer's pocket. There's a lot of things they're going to have in place. Menopause, again, is in their list. I've got 0-hour workers, worker contracts. I'm just thinking what else I've got here. Statutory sick pay, extend the tip law, national minimum wage to take into account cost of living,
and the fire and hire.
Yeah. Fire and rehire as well, on the back of P&O as well. Look, you know, expanding on what the Conservatives have already put in. I'm thinking if I've missed anything out. Ethnicity and disability pay gaps as well. There's
going to be more reporting requirements.
Yeah, more reporting requirements. So HR has already been busy for the last 10 years, I have to say. It's going to be super busy for the next few years. Financially, directors are going to have deep pockets, and I just think every contract's got to be looked at, and policies. We've done it in April, October, we're going to have to do it, and I know that the 25th of October is very important for everybody to again listen to us talking about it, and it will link very nicely with this.
Brilliant, thank you, Amanda.
Yeah.
Well, thank you all of you. It sounds like we're in for a very exciting time, and with this key date of the 25th of October, we'll all be watching that with the 100 days and how much is achieved, and we expect definitely to have a budget
I hope that's
before
not the 25th of October as well.
No, we're probably expecting a budget towards mid to late September. So we'll be keeping you up to date with all the developments across all our areas. And thank you very much for your time, everyone, and thank you.